Hi, my name is Bonnie Stewart from Rockwall Garden. Zucchini season is in full swing here, and tonight I'm going to show you how to make zucchini bread. So I'm going to make a couple loaves of zucchini bread here, and I'm going to do a couple of experiments here with the loaf pans. I have 2 loaf pans, and I'm going to try buttering one loaf pan with some soft, really summer-looking butter here. It's much easier to butter a pan in the summer than it is in the winter. You know what happens to a metal pan in the winter? Try to rub that butter across it and it won't even stick. And you can be as generous with the butter as you want to be. It's better to put too much butter on it than not put enough. In fact, that's usually the case with butter on all recipes. Okay, so that's the butter, but then I'm going to try cooking spray because, well, you know, some people don't like the mess that butter makes. Let's put this aside and greasy thing out of the way. I'm going to use olive oil here and spray it generously. Again, better not too much than too little. We don't want that bread stuck in the pan. And very importantly for these quick breads is to flour the pan. So I'm just going to put all this flour in here, bang it around. In fact, flouring is probably almost more important than whether you have butter or cooking spray, is to have a good even coating of flour all over the pan. Okay, now this is what you can do, is put the pans together. And now that one looks like that's going to prevent sticking pretty well. I don't see any shiny spots. We have plenty of flour left over. Oops, but I see this one. See, this demonstrates what happens when you didn't quite get the butter everywhere. So it's very hard to butter something once it's been floured. So it's probably better just spray a little cooking spray on there and see what happens when we throw the butter out. Yep, there we are. And this excess flour, by this time it's got butter stuck in and everything, so I don't put this back in the canister. I just put up the trash can. I love these trash cans with a foot pedal. That was me banging it into the trash can. Okay. There's our pan prepared. Oh, and I was going to melt the butter before I prepared the pans, but I have other projects I can do. Very important when you're melting butter in the microwave, you don't want it to splatter. So it's good to put something over the top. If you still got the butter wrapper, which I forgot, I threw the butter wrapper in the trash. That was not good recycling. You can put a paper towel. So we're going to go easy on the butter. We're going to put it probably to low cook power of about 5 and cook time about 45 seconds. Let's see what that does. I'm going to start with the liquid ingredients. Right here in this pan I have 2 cups of sugar. The recipe here though calls for 3 cups of sugar. So what I'm going to do, because sometimes you have to use substitutes, I didn't have a whole lot of sugar in my canister tonight, so I'm going to use partly honey. Now honey's a real mess to measure in a measuring cup. It doesn't come out easily. But if your recipe calls for vegetable oil, which this does, put the vegetable oil in your measuring cup first. Now, I'm going to only use half a cup of vegetable oil. This isn't marked very well, but I can tell that's about a half a cup. Because I've also melted about a half a cup of butter in the microwave. My recipe calls for a cup of vegetable oil, but I just love the taste of butter in things. So I'm just going to let this coat the inside of the cup. There's the vegetable oil. And then I'm going to use 3/4 of a cup of commercial honey. I'm not allowed to use my husband's honey in cooking. My husband's honey is allowed to be spread on bread. So I'm going to use Cox Honeyland, which is our local honey company. And once you get up to a cup of honey, don't put cup for cup with honey because honey is actually sweeter than sugar. So by the time you get to a cup of honey, use about a cup of sugar. You can substitute about 3/4 of a cup of honey. And I'm just eyeballing it. That's about 3/4 of a cup of honey. So now all told, I've got the equivalent of 3 cups of sugar. I also want you to see how nice it is when you've measured honey in a measuring cup that had vegetable oil in it first. You barely even need a spatula. Just that one last little drip. And we're done. Okay. Hopefully that's the last I need of that measuring cup because I've measured some other stuff here. Okay, but I've only got half the fat that it calls for. Let's hope my butter's done. Yep. Yes. It's melted, it's hot. And this I will have to scrape out. Okay, so we did not skimp on butter, and we did not skimp on sweetener. Because you know what? Zucchini doesn't have any fat or sugar hardly in it, so you have to add it and be generous. That's my paper towel thing right there. Get my honey out of the way. And that's all the liquid ingredients except for my 4 fresh farm eggs that our chickens laid. So just, and you know, ideally actually it'd probably be good if I just break these into the bowl, because sometimes you know how you get shell in there, or sometimes with even though these are usually good eggs, occasionally you get one that doesn't look quite right, so you don't want to mess up your whole recipe by not being able to fish the egg out. But these chickens are very reliable. These are looking good. Oops, milk on that. But it doesn't matter since I'm not making lemongrass pie. Okay, love the colors of these eggs. 1 olive, 1 teal, 2 brown ones. Trash. Okay. 4 eggs. Add those. That concludes our liquid ingredients except for the zucchini. Now the zucchini here, I've already grated up 2 cups. It's not quite as dense as I'd like it. I'd like a little more in there because it really, it bakes down. And so I'm going to show you how I like to peel my zucchini. This was a fairly large zucchini, so I have some left over. So I'm going to cut this in half here, peel it, because now some people will put this green rind in their zucchini bread, and that is fine, especially if you have a very new zucchini that was just picked that day. But if you allow the zucchini to stand, it's perfectly good. It just, over time, the rind on that thickens a little bit, and so it's not quite as good in your zucchini bread. So it's always better. It's really hard to grate into something this size. I usually use a plate. You can grate the seeds too. They really won't be a problem, especially if your zucchini is very small. Okay, so this is the zucchini that I'm going to add after I've mixed up my liquid ingredients here. So right now I'm mixing my honey, my sugar, my melted butter, my 4 eggs. I'm just double checking my recipe here because this is a big time. Make sure I've got everything. This one calls for water, but that's if you're using pumpkin to make pumpkin bread. The zucchini already has so much water in it, and honey is also liquid that I really think that we're probably going to be best off not adding water to this recipe. You don't want it to be too dense and wet, or it won't bake and it won't rise very well. My mother's zucchini bread recipe did not call for water, so of course I'm going to do it that way. Okay, but this is usually a wire whisk has enough power. I mean, if I wanted to use an electric mixer, I could, but then that would make so much noise that you wouldn't be able to hear me talking, and that could be a problem. Okay, so the recipe says that then you add your zucchini to the liquid. At this point, I don't like to use a wire whisk because all it does is just tangle the zucchini up in it. So I am going to switch to a spoon. Right here's my big spoon. There it is. It's strange. Zucchini is something that's so cheap, yet so valuable at the same time, just because of the narrow growing season it has. And it's kind of one of those all or nothing things. It's very expensive in the off season, and right now you're just like either picking it every day so it doesn't grow into those baseball bat sized things. But if it does, then this is one thing that you can do with it. It's a very good thing to do with it. So now, because I've got my wet ingredients mixed up, I've got my pan ready, almost ready to throw this in the oven, so I'm going to go start the oven heating up. I'll start at 350 degrees. I have to take out my iron. Oops, my iron skillet's hot, because I store my iron skillet in the oven along with my other stuff, because I like to keep them dry. And the oven, when it's warm after using it for something else, helps to dry out the iron. It prevents it from rusting. It also, because if you have less storage in your kitchen than you would like, that's one good way to manage it. And oh, I want to do one more thing to my liquid ingredients. I want to add a teaspoon of vanilla. And a quarter teaspoon, I'll start out with a quarter teaspoon of rum flavoring because the butter and rum together in zucchini bread are just really, really nice. They just give it almost a holiday flavor. That's not too much. No, that might be a little too much, so. If you feel like you've gotten too much, it's better to drop a bit extra into the sink than put too much into your recipe. It's pretty strong smelling. It smells like Lifesavers. Okay. So that's my liquid. I need now to get another wire whisk, a dry one. A fork will work just fine. Because you want to make sure, this is the salt and the baking soda mixed together. I don't know where my salt shaker is, but there's my soda. And then I took my spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, and put them in here. And then it's good to blend them really thoroughly into your flour before you put the dry ingredients and the wet ingredients together. The reason that you do all your stirring while your flour's in this pan and your wet ingredients are in that pan is that once you mix the wet ingredients with the flour, it seems to develop the proteins in the flour. I think it's the gluten. And if you stir them too much, the gluten becomes very rubbery and thick, and it really kind of makes your texture of your bread not as light or as tender. So because this zucchini qualifies as a quick bread, because it's not made with yeast. Quick breads, you have to handle the flour very, very carefully and not overdo it. So once I put the flour into the liquid ingredients, I'm only going to stir it just until they're mixed together. And I see how this looks. I may decide it needs a little more cinnamon. Give it to me right. You don't want to put too much cinnamon in because some people will complain that it gives them heartburn. And so it's better to have a little too little than too much. So if we've got too light on the cinnamon, well, you can always add cinnamon spread or do whatever you do to make cinnamon toast. But I think you'll find that with that vanilla rum flavoring in it together, that you don't need anything else. You just wonder why people don't make zucchini bread at Christmas, and that's because we live up north. Because it will taste kind of Christmassy. Of course, you can freeze a zucchini in the freezer. People do that, and then they use it to make zucchini bread all year round. If you have a lot of time and patience and want to grate up great big zucchinis into storage containers and freeze them, that is a good way. I mean, you can feel good about not wasting your zucchini. You can also feed zucchini to chickens. I hope this turns out. I'm using a very proven recipe, but I've always used this with pumpkin bread, not zucchini bread. So it's going to make two rather large loaves because they fill the pans way up. Well, I think those pans are reasonably even. They don't have to be perfectly the same amount. It's just that if you get one a lot more than the other, then one pan will bake faster than the other. We'll just put it in the oven for about an hour and see what happens. Oh, the oven's ready. There it goes. You want the light on? You want the oven light? Set it for an hour. I'll look in on it after about 50 minutes probably and see if it's done. It's always good to stop about 10 minutes before the time is up to see if it baked faster than you thought it would. And then our next step will be to take it out. Timer just ran. Gonna get these out. Okay, now the first thing is to check the crack in the top, make sure it's dry. Yeah, and you can touch it, and then if it doesn't go, leave an impression, then you know that the center is done. It's kind of a nice, rich, dark brown. That's probably because of the honey in it. And the moment of truth is when we take it out of the pan. I need another oven mitt because I want to be able to hold it. Shift it on the way over here to your cooling rack, and then just turn it upside down and see what happens. If it's gonna come out, it'll come out. Oh, so it did. You know, I don't know which one, whether that was the butter or the cooking spray. Anyway, we'll see if they both work. Now sometimes you can kind of get a feel for whether it's gonna come up by, while it's still in it. Yep, see if it kind of bounces. You're like, oh good, it's gonna come out without any sticking. There. All right, so our experiment has shown us that whether you use olive oil or butter, it doesn't really matter. I can guarantee you which one is going to taste better. It's probably going to be this one over here, which I think this one has the butter, because the olive oil is just a little bit more white, and it'll give you a nice buttery, rich flavor. But you can leave them upside down like that to cool. It'll leave marks on there, or you can turn them over if you don't want marks on top. I'm just going to leave it like this, and when it's cool, we'll give it a taste. Thanks for watching. I'll be sure to include the printed recipe on my website, and please like and subscribe.